I think what I enjoy most about action movies is probably the element of destruction. I quite like seeing there's something quite fun about watching things sort of smashed or in a car chase. It's no fun unless something goes wrong or something drives into something. And I quite like as well if it's just sort of a fight scene. I quite like if there's something original about it. So like in the Bourne films where he uses a pen or like a rolled up magazine to fight with. I think that's quite exciting. I think my favourite aspect of action movies is the chases. I particularly like chases where they're on foot and they're sort of jumping over rooftops and things like that. I think you get a really good sense of the places in a city or a location where you wouldn't normally see when you're just on street level. So I really enjoy seeing those different sides to a location. So it might be on the roofs, or it might be that they're going through windows, or across train tracks. But I find that pace and that action really exciting. So to me, that title suggests that there might be something to do with family, so that perhaps some of the characters are related. It says it's going to be quite violent, so I'm imagining there will be some sort of bloodshed in there somewhere. And there might be an element of crime as well. The first thing I think of with bad is that sort of idea of crime. It sounds like a really good title, I think. Doesn't tell you too much, so you're still wondering what it's going to be about, but it does suggest that it's going to fit really well in that genre. So I'd watch that, yeah. So in an action movie, I expect to see quite fast-paced scenes. I wouldn't really be looking for lots of dialogue, but lots of action. I always like it when there's lots of different locations. So I think a good action movie will have a scene in one place, and then there might be another sequence in another place. I think as well in an action movie you want someone to be following, sort of protagonist or a hero, someone whose story you really buy into, because then when the action happens you're a lot more invested in what happens to that character. So I'd say my favourite action movies are all of the Bourne films, apart from Bourne Legacy, that was a bit rubbish, but all the other Bourne films are really good. And in a similar vein, or for a similar reason, I liked Casino Royale, and there's a great French film called District B14, I think. And I think what all those films have in common is that there's lots of sort of street chases. The fights are really creative. So, for example, everyone remembers the fight on the crane in Casino Royale. And you really got the sense that the director had thought about not just what is going to happen, but where is it going to happen and how are we going to film it. So those would be my favourites. So I think action movies are obviously probably the loudest kind of movie. I remember I had a music teacher who played as a clip from an action film without any of the sound or any of the music in. It's amazing the difference it makes. I think sound, often when the camera work is very fast, sound gives you a sense of what's happening. So there might be something sort of crashing or splintering, or there might be people shouting, or the sound of sort of cars revving up. So sound helps you navigate through the scene. I also think the music's really, really important. Something with a good sort of beat to it, that's quite driving, that pushes the action on and builds up the tension. I think it's important as well to have a contrast. So actually really effective moments in action movies can be where the sound sort of suddenly stops, or you notice that the sound has changed. I think it helps raise our heartbeat, make us more interested in the scene, and as I say, it helps us make a bit more sense of what's happening on the screen as well. So I think when I'm already into a movie, what keeps me going is some kind of twist, or the sense that there is a real danger that the character is in. I think some films make it look too easy, so the action hero just sort of doesn't even break into a sweat. Actually, when you get to a point in a film where an action hero seems like they actually could lose the scene, or the action could go against them, or they could even die in some cases, I think that makes you more hooked, because you think, maybe I'm not going to get the straightforward ending that I'm expecting. I think what makes me watch action movies, to be honest, it's usually it's usually, from what I see of the trailer, I've mentioned the locations a lot. Locations are really important for me, but also I think a director that's done other kinds of films, I'm always really interested to see how they would bring that character work or that tension into an action film as well. But yeah, it's mostly, I think, in those trailers I'm looking for maybe a good soundtrack and a good location. It's not really a question I've thought about before. I don't think I had a preference, although sort of going through in my head, I think most of the films I have watched have at least got a male lead. I think sometimes that element of violence in the films I've seen at least can be more when you've got sort of more of a male cast. Although actually Kill Bill has just popped into my head, and that's a really, really good action film that does have more of a, well, it has a female lead at least. I don't think it's something I'd be aware of making a choice of when I went to see a film. I'd probably go and see a film regardless of what the cast was like. But actually I think an action film that did have a female cast or female lead could do really interesting things with sort of twisting the genre and twisting what people expect from a traditionally male sort of film. So thinking about this, I have in my mind sequences that I can't quite remember whether they are at the opening or not. Particularly with the Bond films, you sort of have two openings because you've got the bit before the titles and the bit after the titles. I remember bits at the beginning of films, but I'm not sure if they're the first thing that the viewer sees. I think sometimes if an opening is really good, actually you've watched sort of 10-15 minutes before you even really realise that you've sort of been watching that scene. So it's quite hard for me to think back and think what are the first sort of opening shots of a particular film. Because I think a good action film drags you in so quickly that actually you sort of remember the whole sequence, but you can't really remember what the first thing you saw was. So that's perhaps not too helpful, but that's the honest answer.